Hey, Jen. All right. Good evening, everyone. I will call to order the village board meeting for July 8th, 2025 at 7:30 PM. Roll is taken. President Heckendorf is absent and excused. We'll move to agenda item 2, the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move to agenda item 3, the 2025 Water Rate Study Phase 2, presentation by Ehlers Financial Advisors with possible discussion and action.
Green is on. All right. It's a little loud. Is that okay? Let me back up a little. Up on top. How's that? Better? All right. Microphones are never my strong suit. 11. Jackie, is it possible to just let it down a little bit?
Try that.
How's that?
Okay, we are
Is that one better? All right, we'll go with number 8 tonight. I guess that's the lucky number. There we go. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Ariana Schmidt here with Ehlers. Tonight we'll be walking through this packet that I've handed out to you all this evening, walking through phase 2 of the long-awaited water rates study results. So we'll flip to slide number 1, just a little refresher as to how we got here. So back in fall, when we went through the financial management plan in 2024, it was identified through the long-range cash flow process that the water utility would be needing a water rate increase in order to continue to be self-sustaining, to be able to pay for operations and fund additional capital projects. So just looking back on history as to where the water utility has been, the last rate increase was done as of January 1st, 2025 through a simplified rate increase, which is a fairly simple process to go through with the PSC, typically is an inflationary increase. In 2025, it was, in 2023 was the last one done prior to that. There's the other option to do a full rate case, which is called a conventional rate case. This is where the PSC really audits your entire financials from the last rate case to the current one. The last full rate case that was performed was in 2010. So it has been quite some time. So this rate case is really taking that opportunity for the PSC to audit your financials, where they've been, and take a look at where the PSC feels that your rates need to be. So biggest takeaway here with requesting a rate increase is that the PSC is the regulatory body over the water utility, and they ultimately determine what your rates are. So unfortunately, you all do not get to decide what the rate is. However, through the application, we can request an actual percent, and the PSC will tell you if that's in line with what they feel that the utility needs to be able to operate. Any questions on the process at all or how we've gotten to this point, which is phase 2? All right, I'm going to keep going, but feel free to stop at any time that you do have questions. So tonight, the idea is that we'll showcase to you the results of the application, what the rate increase is that we'll be requesting, and ultimately to get the consensus from you all to file the application. So turning to slide number 3, just a quick overview of the PSC math. On the left-hand side, this is how much revenue shown that we would expect the utility to generate from user rates to be able to sustain operations. So on the left-hand side is your cash basis. However, again, the PSC works under their own rules, and they use what's called the utility basis method. So on the left-hand side, we take what's called your operating and maintenance expenses, so your day-to-day expenses to be able to fund operations, plus any taxes or pilot expenses, and any debt service payments. We then, with that calculation, net out any other non-user rate revenues, and that's what gets us to your total revenue requirement, which is how much revenue the utility should be generating to be able to sustain operations. PSC approaches this a little bit differently. On the right-hand side, you'll see the same O&M expenses and taxes considered. However, the item that the PSC considers here is depreciation. So they want you to collect a certain percentage on the amount of the undepreciated value of all assets in the system. So obviously, as you add new assets to the system, they're not depreciated whatsoever, so that full amount is going to increase that they want you to collect in terms of a benchmark earnings return. Right now, that rate of return is about 6.7%. When we went through the long-range cash flow back in fall, it was closer to 6.4%. So the idea with that percentage is that it's about similar to market rate interest rates plus 2%. So that's where they get to the 6.7%. Again, it's a benchmark that's set by the PSC that we don't get to control. So I'll showcase this to you in numbers what this all means, but that's just a little bit of the background on what the math is. So turning to slide number 4, just a couple highlights of what's changed since we went through this back in 2024, excuse me. Since then, the 2024 PSC annual report has been completed, and your 2025 budget has been finalized as well. So we're able to take into account the actuals from 24 and updated projected numbers for 2025 based on the budgeting process that you all went through. Since then as well, there's also been some additional customers incorporated into the mix, which obviously brings in additional revenue from water utility rates that we're able to incorporate into the application calculation. And then your capital improvement plan has been further carried out, financings have been executed, actual projects have gone out to bid, and estimated project costs have been more accurate since the estimates that we had last fall. And then additionally, PSC does allow normalization of costs to be incorporated into your expense line items. So for example, water tower paintings are obviously one large cost that they don't expect you to incorporate that full cost into 1 year. They'll normalize that cost year over year instead. So all of those factors are what have played into where we're at in terms of the rate increase with the application. So taking a look at the rate performance, the top half here is that cash basis that I walked through where we consider debt payments and any cash funded capital, but the PSC uses their own math called the utility basis, which is the lower half of the chart. So really where we're arriving at your rate increase requesting in the application is the lower half. So you'll see under the application 2025 column, we take those O&M and pilot costs plus depreciation. Then we have what's called the net investment rate base. That is the total value, undepreciated value of the system in which the PSC expects you to recover that 6.7% earnings on. So taking that all into account, we then compared that user rate revenue to the actual that revenue requirement to the actual user rates generated by the utility. That then showcases if there's a deficit and if the rates are adequate in the PSC's eyes. In this case, you'll see there's a deficit of about $252,000, which is how the PSC arrives at the need for a rate adjustment of 16.38%. So catapulting off of that will showcase what that means in terms of your cash flow projections for the future. So while you're going through this in 2025, the PSC process is very lengthy. Upon filing, it'll be about 6 months before you actually get to rate implementation. So that's why we're showcasing that rate increase in 2026 here at the 16.38%. So then what we're showing here is taking those revenues with the increase, netting out operating and maintenance expenses and pilot. We then have that middle line called net before debt service and capital. That's how much remains that's available to then pay for debt service and any cash funded capital. So you'll see in 2026, for example, you do have a slight negative cash flow, but that's by design because the utility is funding some projects from debt proceeds that were issued earlier this year and from some cash reserves on hand. Really what we're focusing on is that bottom line called the all-in debt coverage that we want to make sure that the utility has at minimum $1.60 available for every dollar of debt service. Now, if you're looking in 26 and saying, why is it well over $1.60? That's because that's the year that the increase is going into effect. Again, PSC sets that rate. It's not a rate you get to select, but it does allow for a cushion for the future years to be able to still generate cash flow year over year and pay for your planned capital projects going forward. The other item I'll note is that there are some light green 3% increases built in future years. This is to plan for some future simplified rate increases similar to what was done on January 1st of 2025. These are meant to be inflationary increases to help keep up with O&M expenses inflating year over year. Now, this can adjust as things change year over year, of course, but we do recommend you continue to revisit this every year, which we'll continue to discuss as a part of the FMP process in the fall as well. But the main reason for this is to ensure that you don't get too far behind PSC math, because these are easy ways to eat into rate increases with minimal impact to your users. Whereas when you get to the full rate case, as you see here, the PSC sets your rate and it's quite a bit higher typically than those inflationary increases. So we've got some of those built in as placeholders, but we'll continue to revisit thereafter. So what does this rate increase mean in terms of dollars? That's what we're taking a look at on the next slide, slide number 7 here. That shows the rate impact analysis for an average residential user. So you'll see this is just for the water bill, so this is not a full utility bill including sewer or anything else. But if you look at the 2026 line, you'll see that 16.38% increase on a quarterly basis is about an additional $15.39 from where your rates are at today. So on an annual basis, that works out to be $61.58 greater than where you're at today. This is based on a sample user that uses 12,000 gallons a quarter. So this is obviously not going to be the truth or the case for every single user. This is just a sample residential user. As a part of the PSC process in reviewing the application, they'll do what's called a cost of service study, which is when they allocate this revenue requirement increase amongst all customer classes between the volumetric charge and your user charge and your public fire protection. So when they release that final rate order, you'll get all of those details, but this is just a simplistic way to represent what that rate increase could mean in terms of dollars. And then looking at the future years, 2028, for example, where you see the 3% increase built in, that equates to a $3.28 increase, quite a bit lower of an impact, about $13 a year. So you can see it's a much more minimal increase, but it will help impact the utility's overall cash flow and help sustain any inflationary increases in expenses. Yes?
How many gallons a year was it based on?
I'm sorry?
How many gallons a year was that based on again?
12,000. 12,000 a quarter, excuse me.
Thank you.
And then turning to the next slide, slide 8. This just showcases in terms of your peers between Dodge County and Washington County where the Village of Jackson falls in terms of rates. This is sorted highest to lowest by the 12,000 gallon column. So you'll see currently the Village of Jackson is second from the lowest in all of those communities. With the rate increase, you'll see that about a third of the way up the page is where you jump to. One other thing I will note is that the effective date column showcases how long it has been since other utilities have had a rate increase, whether that be simplified or a full rate case increase. Typically what you see is the more recent the increase, the higher up the community moves. Some communities that you'll see that haven't had one in quite some time are typically lower on the list. In this case, while you just had one in 2025, it was a simplified. The full rate case hasn't been done since 2010, which is likely why you're so low on the chart right now. So even with the rate increase, you're still on the lower half in terms of comparison to your peers. One other note is that this isn't necessarily an apples to apples comparison. You'll see the minimum quarterly bill does vary. This is not sorted by that column, so that can jump around a little bit. Every utility is different. Every rate structure is different in terms of how the tariff is set up, whether it's quarterly, monthly, how public fire protection is structured, and so on. So this is a good, rough comparison, but don't take it to heart too much because there are differences in one utility to the next. But a lot of communities like to see this as to how each community compares to the next. So just to summarize on slide number 9 here, what the recommendations are for tonight is really getting your consensus to file the application for test year 2025 at the benchmark rate of return that we've presented tonight. One other item to note is that in order to follow the PSC's calendar year, that this does have to be filed before July 31st to be considered a test year 2025 increase. If filing after July 31st, it becomes test year 2026, and we do have to revisit the application because the calendar year turns over. So it's different than a typical calendar year in terms of the PSC's timeline. In terms of next steps, after filing the application is when the PSC goes through that audit process I alluded to earlier, where they basically go through all of your PSC annual reports you filed for the last 15 years, go through all of the financials, and send us a bunch of questions, asking all sorts of questions about projects that have been done in the past, asking for old records, and a lot of fun things that staff will really look forward to going through. After we get through that, there will be a public hearing held by the PSC. They do these all virtually right now via Zoom. There will be a public notice that they require you to post prior to then. However, keep in mind that public notice isn't required to be posted until about 4 or 5 months after you file this application. So one thing that we recommend is you start to get the word out to your residents now, sooner, that they know that this is coming, understanding that the PSC controls the rates. However, it doesn't look as good to your residents if they're getting notice of this 4 or 5 months from now that you filed this and made this decision quite some time ago. So putting it in your newsletter or whatever that may be is a good way to get this news out sooner than later. And then lastly, you'll get a final rate order that gives you 90 days to implement the rates as outlined from the PSC's cost of service study. And then last recommendation is just to continue with the utility cash flow updates annually with your FMP and considering those simplified rate increases as appropriate and as your capital improvement plan changes. So I'll open it up to any questions or comments.
Just looking at the rate impact analysis sheet. So next year would be the 16.38% is what we're looking at. And I know initially it was supposed to be, was it closer to 20?
Yep.
So this went down because more people came on board and.
Yeah, a few different things. We do our best guess with the long-range cash flow analysis, but we do use assumptions, some of which are conservative assumptions, including what your budgeted amounts are for expenses. We've now been able to update that with actuals for 2024, whereas previously we were using estimated values. Additionally, we are able to factor in those added users, which is additional revenue. And then lastly, your asset additions, because PSC's math is based on the undepreciated value of the system. As new projects are planned, costs are updated, that all changes the math and calculation as well. So typically this is what we like to see, where we estimated too high and can give you good news rather than the reverse, which is why we use conservative assumptions. But yes, you are correct, it is a few percentage points below what we had forecasted out about 9 months ago.
So every other year is going to be a no increase.
Until you go back to the PSC and request an increase. So we have simplified rate increases built in starting in 2028, but we can revisit that. The other thing that would change this is if you change your capital improvement plan and pursue any different projects than what we have factored in. Depending on what loan you would take out to fund that project, there are debt coverage requirements in which you have to have a certain amount of revenues in place to be able to close on those loans. So that's oftentimes why we see utilities go back to the PSC for a full rate case, is to ensure that you're able to close on that loan. Right now, that's not the case, which is why we're not showing any other large increases, but that's not to say that won't change in the future, depending on decisions you all make with capital planning.
The 12,000 gallons per quarter, is, what size home or what?
Yeah, I don't know what size home it is. It's just typically the average usage that we see for a residential home, typically with 2 to 4 people. So a single individual living in a residential household is going to use quite a bit less. So if there's any other numbers you'd like us to run, we can update this to show you exactly what that would look like based on different usage.
No, if you're saying it's like up to 4 people, that's all I needed to know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I can also follow up on Ariana's recommendation that public messaging be something you consider pursuing ahead of time. We did place an update in the April Jackson Quarterly where you would have probably gotten a little bit more sticker shock because previous conservative estimates did project closer to 29% increase. And so that April newsletter did capture a much higher value than what Ellers is recommending the village request of the PSC, and that's that 16.8%. It's either 8.3 or 3.8.
3.8.
I opted to put too many slides on one page. And so from the board's perspective, what staff could do, we've attempted to already manage, which is that public messaging and public information. Of course, there were inquiries made after that article was published, but we're happy to answer those questions and concerns, just like you may sometimes get from those concerned utility users. Another thing to point out, Ariana is alluding to how conservative the projections were last year, as we also were expecting to see annual simplified rate case adjustments from 2028 all the way through probably beyond 2034. You will see, as we update that financial management plan annually, you will see what changes may occur in the capital projects plan, how that would in real time, or at least on an annual basis, do to the simplified rate case adjustments. Right now, it's 3%. So if this year, when we talk again in August, any of our projects would otherwise contradict what we're seeing, you would know beforehand and annually thereafter.
Yep.
That makes sense.
In these increase that goes toward running the wells, it goes toward our staff, the equipment, it goes toward capital projects, street repairs that we wouldn't have to, I guess, borrow money to, if we didn't, utility didn't kick in money towards these projects, which benefits the whole village, the way I look at it, because we're all using the services of the utility.
Yep, exactly. The added revenue is basically to ensure that all of those things you just mentioned are able to be funded by the utility. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to afford to pay for all of those future projects that aren't considered out of pocket, but those are things that through the FMP we can update and factor in to determine where that puts you. A part of the CIP that we have right now does include many projects being paid for by cash. The PSC doesn't consider your cash reserves when they set the rates. They don't care how much cash you have, they care about the cash coming in the door. So that's why we're making sure through the FMP that you're utilizing that cash reserves on hand to fund some projects, and then also making sure you're keeping enough in your reserves for emergencies, main breaks, things like that that might arise in the future too.
I know you mentioned it, Jen, when we put something out before. I know I'm not a Facebooker at all, so, but there were people on there putting comments on there, blasting basically the board for the water rate increases. And I think if we do put something out, let them know the rates are not what we initially thought, it's gonna be a lot lower. But maybe put in there, like she just alluded to too, that what this money is going for too, so people know what this goes, you know, cause a lot of people don't have a clue. They just pay their bill and that's all they see. I mean, it would probably help just to
Sure.
let people know what this is for and what we're doing.
Maybe by October, we would have a publication, Ariana, if the PSC would make a determination that quickly following a July application. I'm less familiar.
Yeah, by fall, we should have a good idea.
Okay.
That'll give us time to go through the audit process with them, but keep in mind, it's all at the hands of the PSC. So that's our best guess, but depending on their timeline, we all have to basically beholden to their timeline.
All right. Other questions or discussion points from the board? Not, I'll make a motion that the village and Ellers file the CRC application for the year of 2025 at the benchmark rate of return of 16.38%.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to agenda item 4, public hearings. Public hearing on ordinance 25-07, which is a correction from the published agenda. An ordinance to amend the adopted 2050 comprehensive plan for the village of Jackson, Washington County, Wisconsin. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak? All right, seeing no one wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing. Move to agenda item 5, Any village citizens signed in on an agenda item? Nope. No one signed in for speaking on agenda items. We will move to agenda item number 6, consent agenda. The approval of minutes for the village board meeting June 10th, 2025, and the proposed contract for cleaning services, N&J Professional Cleaners LLC. I will make a motion to approve both.
Second.
We have a motion, second. Any further discussion?
Ryan, I just got a question. For the cleaning service, I know they're doing, I read up on what I could read up on it, what we had. Are they gonna doing background checks and everything on the employees?
Yes, it's in the contract that we do criminal background checks on their employees.
And then if they someone with a new person would come in, they would, same thing would, before
Absolutely.
they started?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And I will add, Brian, when we do go out, because this is just the second time we've sought proposals, we actually prioritize a family-run business in comparison to a commercially owned and often the employer of many type outfit, because we feel that personal relationship. This couple actually cleans next door to us at the credit union. We feel like if they're a trustworthy company by their standards, they'll also be meeting our own. And we're enthusiastic to say it is a lower amount than we currently fund. It had to do with some movement and frequency of cleanings, but we were financially seeking numbers that were lower than where we're at right now in an expenditure sense.
Are they a local group? Okay.
All right, any other discussion? We have motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7. 7A, change order number 1, Ridgeway Drive and Chestnut Court reconstruction project from Advanced Construction for an increase in the amount of $83,797.32. This came from Budget and Finance with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 1, Ridgeway Drive and Chestnut Court reconstruction project for Advanced Construction for an increase in the amount of $83,797.32.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 7B, pay request number 2, Ridgeway Drive and Chestnut Court reconstruction project, advanced construction in the amount of $219,429.58. This came from Budget and Finance with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve pay request number 2 for Advanced Construction in the amount of $219,429.58.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7C, pay request number 16, wastewater treatment plant tertiary filters and UV disinfection project for J.H. Hassinger in the amount of $99,540.52. And this came from Budget and Finance with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve pay request number 16, wastewater treatment plant tertiary filters and UV disinfection project for J.H. Hassinger in the amount of $99,540.52.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7D, Clean Water Fund Loan Request number 13, 2024 wastewater treatment plant project in the amount of $125,364.57. And that came from the Budget and Finance Committee with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Clean Water Loan Fund number 13, 2024 wastewater treatment plant project in the amount of $125,364.57.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any further discussion on this item? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7E, wastewater treatment plant disc filter maintenance, Veolia Water Technologies, in the amount of $113,071.38. That came from Budget and Finance with a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve wastewater treatment plant disc filter maintenance for Viola Water Technologies in the amount of $113,071.38.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7F, review of bids, Glenbrook Drive and Jackson Drive Path Project. This came from Budget and Finance with a recommendation to approve the Glenbrook Drive project for $88,505 for Poblocki paving and the Jackson Drive maintenance project for $7,300 for Johnson paving.
I'll make a motion to approve the Glenbrook Drive path to Poblocki paving for $88,505 and the Jackson Drive path to Johnson and Sons paving for $7,300.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 7G, 2025-2026 contract amendment number 2, Bremer and Associates in the amount of $301,825. And this came from Budget and Finance with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2025 to 2026 contract amendment number 2, Bremer and Associates in the amount of $301,825.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 7H, pay request number 13, Jackson Community Center Expansion Project, more construction in the amount of $108,416.85. And this came from the Budget and Finance Committee with a recommendation to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve pay request number 13, Jackson Community Center Expansion Project for more construction in the amount of $108,416.85.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question.
Yes.
How many more, I ask this every time, how many more payments are we gonna be making here? This seems to be a never-ending thing.
Yeah, so as the project finishes up, we're waiting on some various IT parts that are for the door function and security portion of the project. We also have some hardware that we're waiting on for some of the gates. So until some of those different parts come in, there's various work that's being done that's kind of been delayed due to the parts that we're waiting on still. So the hope is that we should only see one more change order. They only want to present one more because it's going to be small, and then we'll wrap up the contract. So the hope is that there's only 1 to 2 more. However, until those parts come in and we're able to wrap up construction, you could see them trickle in as work continues with different contractors wrapping up the smaller tasks in the project as we wrap up those final different pieces of the project.
Tyler, did you also say at Budget and Finance that there would be some credits as well?
Yeah, so different pieces within the project, we've either been able to make adjustments with some of these things that we're waiting on, or things that have come in less expensive than what we originally anticipated, and so that final change order will include some credits that'll come back to us on the contract, as well as some additional expenses that were found as they've done some work on things and found pieces that weren't quite right or that needed to be fixed as a part of the project.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I just got one question. Tyler, do you know, like where we're at within the budget for this? Are we gonna be below what we borrowed, or are we gonna be at or above?
Yeah, so everything's trending. It's still looking like we're gonna be under budget for this, project as a whole.
Yeah,
I couldn't give you an exact number at this point, without reviewing the most recent change order from, I think, April or May. That was the last time that we, went into our contingency, so, there was still a decent amount left in that. So it is getting closer than what we anticipated, but we are expected to be under budget still at the end of the day.
Okay, thanks.
While using the contingency fee, basically.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 8, Plan Commission. Ordinance 25-07, an ordinance to amend the adopted 2050 comprehensive plan for the Village of Jackson, Washington County, Wisconsin.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 25-17, amending the definition of multifamily urban density residential, updating the land use categories for certain parcels referred within the resolution, amending map 1 titled Land Use Plan for the Village of Jackson 2050 contained within the Village of Jackson Comprehensive Plan.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Roll call vote?
Trustee Olson,
Aye.
Trustee Emmerich,
Aye.
Trustee Engelhardt,
Aye.
Trustee Krupke,
Aye.
Trustee Kurtz,
Aye.
Trustee Wells.
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
All right. Make a motion to suspend the rules and have the second reading tonight.
I'll second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Would you like to?
Do we require a roll call for suspension of the rules? We might have inversed that. Do you mind,
Sure.
Trustee Olson?
Roll call vote?
I was just looking at that.
It's a rookie mistake. It's okay.
Who made the motion?
I did.
Tracy, who made the second?
Brian did.
I did.
Trustee Olson,
Aye.
Trustee Emmerich,
Aye.
Trustee Engelhardt, Trustee Krupke,
Aye.
Trustee Kurtz,
Aye.
Trustee Wells.
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Would you like to reintroduce the ordinance?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution 25-17, amending the definition of multifamily urban density residential, updating the land use categories for certain parcels referred within the resolution, amending map 1 titled Land Use Plan for the Village of Jackson 2050 contained within the Village of Jackson Comprehensive Plan.
I'll second.
Could I just make one correction? You said resolution 25-17. It should be ordinance 25-07.
6.
Or, no, 07.
2507? Yes. Okay, adopt the ordinance
Ordinance, yeah.
25-07.
You still second, Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 9, West Bend School District report.
No new updates.
All right. Agenda item number 10, Washington County Board report. I have a report here from Supervisor Schwab. At its upcoming meeting on July 9th, 2025, the Washington County Board of Supervisors will be considering applications for replacements to serve in the recently vacated District 5 Supervisor position, and also hear the county executive's initial budget goals for the 2026 and 2027 Washington County budget. 2 resolutions will deal with sharing county GIS services with the towns of Barton and Erin. A culvert replacement project will be considered for the town of Barton, and a final resolution will delegate authority to the county executive to enter into opioid settlement agreements. Finally, the board will consider creating an ordinance in section 172-24 of the county code dealing with sexting. And thank you for all you do, citizens of Washington County and Jackson. Agenda item number 11, Greater Jackson Business Alliance. I don't believe there's a report. Agenda item number 12, Mid-Murray Municipal Association report. Nothing new to report. It is the out of session season, so the meetings will pick up again in September. And move to agenda item number 13, closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the village has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Section 19.85 sub 1 sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And section 19.85 sub 1 sub G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. The closed session is for the following purposes: to receive information regarding specific employees. I will make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Motion second. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Olson,
Aye.
trustee Emmerich,
Aye.
trustee Engelhardt,
Aye.
trustee Krupke,
Aye.
trustee Kurtz,
Aye.
trustee Wells,
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. We are in closed session.